all of a sudden now this team, it's a question of can they score? Because the reality is, other than a Honduras outburst here, a Ukraine outburst there, there's been a lot more 0-0 against Cote d'Ivoire, 1-1 against Curacao, 2-0 against El Salvador, 1-1 against Guatemala, where you leave gritting your teeth, being like, what the heck happened? And that for me, it's tough because it's not like you're sitting there looking at a lack of talent. They're most talented up front and out wide, but for whatever reason, the combinations, the players, this maybe even you look at the tactical fit hasn't always clicked with consistency and with regularity. So yeah, that's where I look at what's the best striker fit. Jonathan David has been basically the lone constant. I think Tajon Buchanan, his play over the last month, has helped them. But, Josh mentioned earlier, Promise David, where does he fit? Daniel Owase, can he be more consistent? Can we get a resurgence from Kyle Aaron? Is Jason Russell Rowe the guy? Are we not talking about someone who's not here? What's going on with Jacob Schaffelberg? For a year, everything he touched was gold. And now all of a sudden it felt like everything he touched this tournament was the opposite. I think the attack is really the big concern, and it's so tough to analyze because they have all the pieces. Jesse Marsch told us they have weapons. I had a fun stat I found in my research last night. Canada has 3 goals from substitutes under Jesse Marsch, guys. One's the Jonathan David goal against Uruguay, so he's not really a substitute. He's not a guy you can count. The other 2 was Junior Hoylett against Suriname, leg 1 quarterfinals. The other one was Promise David versus Honduras. They don't get enough goals from their subs, and they should, because they have these weapons. They have this deep attacking pool, and they haven't even come close to maximizing it.
Part of the problem is that, like, you're almost asking whoever we're talking about that's not Jonathan David, you're asking him to play in a way as a bit of a lone striker, because David drops deep and plays as a 10 more and more. I think at this point you probably aren't going to bring in a lot of new faces, right? That's the other lens we have to look at here, is that you're probably not introducing a lot of new faces with a year out. You're going to be using a lot of the video and a lot of the experiences from the Gold Cup with the players that you have, right? And the key is for Jesse Marsch and his coaching staff somehow being separated from these players is not letting this tournament fester, right? Not letting 2 disappointing tournaments fester. And it's still, I guess we should just ask, if we're talking about it, if you had to make a bet as who the second forward is beside Jonathan David right now, who like on June 12th, 2026, who is it?
Daniel Owase.
Promise David.
It's sort okay. Now I get to actually play host here. It sort of depends what type of opponent they're playing. Canada like Promise David when they will have more of the ball and they can own possession and they can allow him to kind of press up against that last defender, because that's what he is. He's a big body that kind of cleans up garbage and just has this remarkable knack for goal, Promise David. But when you're asking, when the other team's going to have the ball and you're asking Canada to press a lot more, the coaching staff have real questions about his fitness level and whether he can maintain that for 5 minutes when you're asked to press. So a lot of it depends on who they're playing. Tanny's my vote as well, but if you're going to go with him, you need to start seeing numbers. You need to start seeing more and more production. He had a great goal against Honduras, but who didn't, right? So I think you're right, Alex, in saying like that's the big question mark. I would probably vote Tanny as well, and you almost hoped there would be a move coming that he could get somewhere else this summer, but it's somewhere where he has to play. I think the coaching staff are really high on him, really, really high on him. I think they feel like they know a little bit more about what he's going to provide, and the fact that he did start yesterday just suggests that they feel that they can depend on him. But you can't keep going with him if he's not going to produce, right?
Well, to play kind of also a devil's advocate and tie it into an earlier point, for me, it also starts tying into plan B, C, D, and all that discussion. Because, for example, for me, the press has become a bit of a secondary story because it's been too good, in the sense that teams look at Canada's press and there's almost been this respect of, oh, we're not going to try to build out the back anymore. We don't want what happened with the US, say in September, where Canada pressed them off the park and got that very impressive 2-1 win in Kansas. Teams are just going to be like, oh, we're going to go long. We're going to play direct. And I do wonder, when you see something like that, is it worth it to be looking at factors such as pressing when you might not get to use your press because the teams are, team scout. The fact that even a team like Cote d'Ivoire realize, okay, we have to buy press Canada in that regard. All of a sudden, I think a Promise David becomes more valuable because the intangible of a press starts to diminish, if that makes sense. And I think that's where Canada needs to be flexible of, oh, you want to play direct, you want to go up against us? Well, we're going to punish you. And I think that's kind of been the struggle we've seen, at least, where we know Canada's game plan of forward 2-2, press, hit on the counter. When they're playing an opponent that mimics those conditions, perfect. Honduras was a great example. They did not know how to handle it. Canada played them off the park. Ukraine, a good top-level European team, could not handle Canada's press. But all of a sudden, as soon as those sort of factors come into play, I think that's where we've seen Canada struggle a bit. And I think that's where maybe you almost need a bit of outside-the-box thinking. And I think that's something where the next 12 months for me are going to be fascinating, because I continue to say I have no issues with plan A. Plan A is fantastic. Well, like you mentioned earlier, let's see these plans B, C, D, and that might involve some weird things such as playing strikers that don't press as much. Maybe that involves playing a third midfielder and tweaking your setup slightly to throw a different wrinkle, because I think that's something where we haven't seen as many different wrinkles from Canada, and that adjustment has made them a bit predictable in certain games like this.
I think, without getting too far in the weeds, what was missing for me, especially last night and in critical games, was just a lack of synergy and cohesion up and down the pitch. Jesse rotated a lot through the group stage. Fine. You want to learn more. You want to try combinations out. But the byproduct of that is you have players, there was none of the same striker pairs or center back pairs, I believe, played together through all three group stage games, or is it none of the three, or none of the midfield pairs? Anyway, the fact that I can't put my finger on it suggests just that like there was not, we don't know who the best 11 or best 13 are. And I think that's something when we talk about plan, whatever, that's something we need to get. And I think Marsch needs to get a little clearer on, right? Because you need to use this year for players to get comfortable playing together. For a long time, the reason that the David Larin partnership was so effective was because they knew each other's movements so well, right? They're friends off the pitch. There's a synergy there, right? And that really seems to be lacking right now. So a big focus of the next year for me has to be, again, not only who are your 26, but who's your top guys that you're going to see game after game. They need reps. They need a lot of reps. And so you mentioned trying some different things. Again, you got to be careful there, because you want to get guys playing together. You want to get guys really, really comfortable with, I think, plan A, because when we've seen that plan A working so well, we know that they are capable of having, capital G games. And again, they need to have, they absolutely need to be at their best in the World Cup. And if you're not, if Marsch and his coaching staff aren't thinking about that, we could be in for a repeat of 2022. But I think they are, and that's why, again, it's not time to panic.
And there was also a lot of talk from Jesse Marsch and this Canadian group ahead of this tournament about, winning trophies, building towards 26. Was this a humble Canadian group that we've seen in the past, or do they have a little bit of overconfidence? And on that, are they ready for the World Cup next year? And how long do they have to go to get ready?
That last question. Benny, what are you doing? That's a big one. Let's save that for March or June 2026. I think that it's a strange double-edged sword. Canada should be confident and should feel differently / better about their chances, because what was missing in the past with this core was that inherent self-belief, right? There's no more, or there can't be any more happy to be at the dance, right? The the confidence, that self-belief is the foundation for going out and actually getting wins. And that foundation is something that Jesse Marsch has worked really, really hard at. I questioned the Jonathan David captaincy move, but it's clear that Jesse Marsch is trying to bring some of his more reserved characters, Jonathan David, Tajon Buchanan, Alphonso Davies, none of which are super type A personalities. He's trying to bring them out of their shell because the coaching staff has identified this team as being too, quite literally, quiet on the pitch. And part of the intangibles and game management and bossing games is literally coming out of your shell and showing that outward, chest thumping confidence that really good teams have. So you get that. And I think they're really on their way to doing that. But when you don't back that up with results, that's where we find ourselves now. And that's the missing piece here, because Canada made terrific headlines and has for a year. They have for a year. They're a headline making machine. But the headline now has to be a lot of talk and a lot of self-belief, but not a lot of results. Right. And it's okay to be super critical of this team if we're doing it in a nuanced way, because they have these expectations. They want these expectations. They want to be, we love this term. We want to be a soccer nation. And this is the way that Mexico, Argentina, Italy, whatever, this is the way they talk about their national team. We want to propel this team into mainstream consciousness. We have to talk about them the way we would, the Canadian Olympic hockey team. So it's fair to talk about them like this, and it's fair for them to have that self-belief, but a win, a result when they needed it would have shown that self-belief is justified, and there's still a lot of work to do there.
Looks as though Alex is on mute, but I think that's all the time that we've got with you, Josh. Thanks so much.
No. I want to hear Alex's point. I can tell when his eyes get big, I know he's got something. He's got some fire to spit.
Yeah, I've been riding the manual mute here because we got garbage trucks flying around. Take of that what you will, if that's some sort of prophecy or something of the like. But yeah, no, I think it's for Canada, that's just kind of that next step. Because for me, heading into next year, they have all the pieces, like they have all the tangibles, so to speak. They have all of a sudden a world-class center back that they didn't have heading into 22. They've got world-class players. They've got cohesion. They've got chemistry. They've got a coach who's, coached at the highest levels. It comes down to intangibles. And that's what's so fascinating, because having watched a lot of different teams, that's something where you can't really control. Sometimes some teams just wake up and they decide they want to be great. PSG this year is a great example. How many demons did they have for a decade? And then all of a sudden this year they just turned up and they want to be dominant. And then it goes other ways. You have clubs with history of torment in the biggest moments, where like England is the prime example, right? How many times have they been hit that psychological wall of where they want to be? And that's tough, because for this Canadian team, it could click at next year's World Cup. They could go on a run, or they could completely flame out, and your stuff being like, oh, well, another year without any World Cup success. Same old for this Canadian team. And I find that so hard to level with, because it's not going to take a snap of a finger. It's not going to something you learn in friendlies. But I guess that's going to be what tells us the true ceiling of this generation, because it's a very high floor generation. It's one that, in other countries, they might throw out the words golden generation, although that term is always overused. But I think that what's going to tell the ceiling is how they bounce back, how they try to turn some of this confidence, bravado into actual results. Because the reality is it's not skewing too great for them right now, but that can change. But the thing is, with the World Cup being at home next year, there's such a clear line in the sand that maybe isn't there in other cycles, where it's just about making a World Cup, et cetera. And I think that's going to lead to some fascinating discourse over the next 12 months.
Okay, before I leave, let's draw a clear line in the sand right now. Let's revisit these in a year's time. Let's do some rapid fire for no other reason than it's fun. Who's your starting goalkeeper on June 12th, 2026?
I would go Dane St. Clair. I think he has the faith of Jesse Marsch, and I don't think he gives that up.
Interesting. I'm gonna go right into the overreaction. I'm gonna go Maxime Crepeau just because now what we've seen that he's done at Copa America, I think, he's at an age where for goalkeepers where he'll still have every shot. I think Crepeau, he'll figure out his club situation. That's for me the big asterisk.
I loved watching. One of the very few highlights from last night was watching Max Crepeau on the sidelines, first in the referee's face, first to console teammates, right? This guy is a warrior, a leader. And while he might not offer the high-end athleticism that Dane St. Clair does, we talk about intangibles. Man, he's the heartbeat of this team in a lot of ways. Who's starting at center back beside Moise Bombito?
Luke de Fougerolles.
Oh, baby.
I like it. I'll go Derek Cornelius. Ben and I we're going contrary on this, so someone will be right and some will be wrong.
Yeah, I think Derek Cornelius is in store for another big club season, and I don't know yet what de Fougerolles' club situation will look like for next year. I think that's a little bit up in the air. I don't, without going into some of the reporting that's been done, but I think there's a little bit up in the air, and I think Derek Cornelius offers some stability just in terms of his club game. Who's starting beside Stefan Eustáquio in the middle of the park?
I'm gonna go with Nathan Saliba. He'll settle at Anderlecht.
I like that. I'm gonna go Nico Seeger just because I think that sixth position, and then I think Ismail Kone will potentially start, but I just see a future where, again, when it all clicks for him, I just see him being tried out at that number 10. But maybe that's just me.
Yeah, Nico Seeger is in a lot of ways the future of this team. We already did forward. That's kind of boring. Is Jacob Schaffelberg a starter on June 12th, 2026?
Not a chance. Not after what he did in that match. And his form with Nashville.
What he did. You sound like a dad already, what you did. Wow. Steiner. Okay. Alex?
I'm going no because I've said it for a while now. I think it's going to be Ali Ahmed. I think just with Ali Ahmed, he brings 8 tendencies, winger-like skills. He's pressed, like he's just a Jesse Marsch player, and I think he's just so complete that you saw him with him out, kind of missed something there.
Okay, last one, and I'm just taking over here. Putting you guys on the spot. I have legitimately wrestled with this, and it bears no actual consequence other than being fun podcast fodder. Who will be a more important player for Canada in 2026, Moise Bombito or Jonathan David?
I think this team lives and dies with Jonathan David, because if he doesn't score, we don't know who will.
I like that. I would agree, but I'm going to go Moise Bombito. Like, it's just wild for me that in 12 months, he's gone from unknown with 1 or 3 caps all in the midfield under John Herdman, and now he might be the most important player on this team. Like, the way when he's on the field, the high line, his leadership already at a young age, he's got the ceiling. Like, I could legitimately seeing him play for a top 5 club in the world in the next 2 years. For me, it's Moise Bombito.
I think the coaching staff feel the same way about Moise Bombito's ceiling, as if it's not like we need their validation. Anybody that watches him can see that, but I just keep coming back to, we talked about it before, that game against Belgium, the World Cup opener. If Moise Bombito, as Moise Bombito is now, is playing on that Canadian side, Belgium probably doesn't get that goal, and maybe Canada gets out 0-0 and they take a different approach maybe against Croatia, and we're having a very different conversation, right? In tournaments, preventing goals and getting out with a draw can sometimes be the difference between a team getting out of the group. I can't believe we're talking about Canada getting out of the group, but that can be the difference. Yes, Jonathan David is going to be remarkably important, but to stifle the other team's opposition To be able to get out with a clean sheet, that could be the difference in a tournament. And I go back and forth, so I'm not going to choose. You guys chose for me, and that's fantastic.